religious indoctrination, public opinion, and individual conscience. Welcome, Vanakkam, Swagatham. In this video, I would like us to get a little more familiar with the real meaning and implications of three crucial words about which we cannot afford to remain vague, unclear, or uncertain. As an introduction to this exercise, let me only say this, that we think only through the medium of language. Language is a repository of meaning. Meaning is related to experiences in the past. And meanings are carried from person to person in interpersonal communication by words. Words comprise phrases, sentences, etc. But the basic unit is the word. Now, it is therefore very important, if you are interested in developing a capacity to think clearly, to be clear in the meanings of words. If you will permit me to use the technical term for it, it is semantic clarity. Semantic, semantic, semantic clarity. Clarity regarding the use of words. Voltaire used to say, I am willing to debate with anyone provided that person is willing to agree with me as to what a word really means. I am not expecting him to accept the peculiar idiosyncratic meaning I want to attach to a word. But there must be an agreement between him and me if we are to carry on with a meaningful dialogue as to what a particular word means, and therefore what all words we are likely to use would mean. If I mean something and you mean something entirely different, when a particular word is used, say a word like piety, or a word like reason, or a word like common sense, or a word like leisure or relaxation. If what I mean by the word leisure is very different from what you mean by that word, then how can there be an exchange of ideas between us regarding the word or experience called leisure or rest or whatever? That is the point. So, I cannot emphasize adequately the importance of cultivating clarity with regard to the meaning of the words that we use. And it is particularly important for Indians who think and speak in English, because English is a foreign language. As a person who has wrestled all my life with a foreign language, namely English, I can tell you that this is a very, very crucial thing. It's because Indians, though they are able to speak the English language fluently, are still alienated from its inner content of nuances, meanings, and connotations. That because of the dominance of English, we are not original thinkers. It's a huge problem in itself. In fact, I have to confide in you that I feel sorry that I lost my organic and intimate connection with my mother tongue, which is Malayalam, because I left Kerala at the age of 20 and came back to settle down here at the age of 65. In between, for 45 long years, 46 long years, my language of work and articulation, etc., was English. And I've gained something thereby, but I've lost a great deal in terms of my inner and intimate as well as imaginative life. But this is not a video about what I have lost or what I have gained. My main point here is that we need to attain clarity. So the aim, the purpose of this video is to attain some clarity about three words: indoctrination, propaganda, and conscience, individual conscience. And what happens when they become one with each other, or they are forced into a kind of mergence. For example, what happens when individual conscience is merged into religious indoctrination, or what happens when individual conscience is fused into political propaganda. I'm sure you will be fascinated by this topic because you're interested in understanding the realities that all of us live. I'm not talking about something very strange and outlandish. In order to give a very precise reference to our thinking, let me recall that monumental episode in which some 1920 terrorists brought down the Twin Trade Towers in New York, which is in many ways a watershed event in the history of modern world. Think of the 19 or 20 young people who hijacked various airplanes and flew them straight at and into the Twin Towers. They knew very well that they would be just crashed into nothing. None of them expected to survive the event, and none of them did. I have ever since meditated on this question. What is it that makes 19 young people in the prime of their youth sacrifice themselves in accomplishing a feat which actually means nothing? I don't think Islam or even global terrorism has gained anything by bringing the Twin Towers down. Rather, they have lost everything. And yet, it's possible to convince young people who are not just illiterate, ordinary people, highly educated people, very promising people, intelligent people, talented people, people with great self-respect, to persuade them to sacrifice themselves at the altar of global violence, religion-inspired violence. I have meditated for years on this question, and therefore, let me share the following thoughts with you. What religious indoctrination does, and this applies to everyone, it applies not only to the religious terrorists or religion-centric terrorism or terrorists, it applies to every believer. And the more ardent a believer you are, the more likely you are to be closer to a religious terrorist. That is why in sensible literature, religious zeal is always equated with madness. Religious zeal borders on madness. Please think about these things. It is impossible to reason out with a person who is religiously zealous. It's impossible to persuade a person who is religiously enthusiastic about the truthfulness of something which is very obvious to anybody else. Once a person is made to believe in something, for example, recently a shocking event came to light in Kenya. 400 people starved themselves to death because the leader of the cult to which they belonged told them that if they starved to death, they would reach heaven assuredly. Now, it's a stupid idea, downright stupid idea. It's a criminal idea. It's a diabolic idea. And yet 400 people believe it to the extent of dying for the sake of that idea. How does that happen? That's the question I'm raising. Think of any instance in which violence of the most vulgar and brutal kind was used, and there are innumerable instances of that in our own country. Do you think the people who participated in it did not have their individual conscience? They all had it. But the trick is, and this is what I wanted to understand, that the trick that religious indoctrination does is to overpower individual conscience to such an extent that it is completely assimilated into the indoctrination. So, indoctrination overpowers the individual conscience so that the conscience of the individual and the agenda of those who brainwash people in the religious manner, they become one. They become one. And also, please notice that in all such contexts there is a common factor. People who are subjected to this kind of religious indoctrination will be zealously guarded and protected against any contrary influence. They also would be disallowed to read widely, to cultivate a universal sense of right and wrong, a universal sense of justice and righteousness, not to say anything about the godly idea of justice, they will be kept entirely confined to this particular framework of indoctrination. And they will be made to believe and believe ardently that exposing themselves to any other influence is impious, dangerous, and something that they cannot even think of in their wildest dreams. So, a complete capitulation not only of their intellect, not only of their conscience, but also of their physical life, including the freedom of thought, freedom to read, freedom to reflect, freedom to seek and find. So, this indoctrination creates a situation of comprehensive slavery, thraldom, bondage, that in a century of freedom. This is what religious indoctrination does, and religious indoctrination has a whole range of possibilities, from Sunday school education to the indoctrination of global terrorists in the name of religion, whichever religion it is. Surely the soldiers who participated in the crusades that were organized were indoctrinated. Today, when we look back on the crusades, the plight of the people who participated in it, we feel sorry for them. We consider all of them who were at that time celebrated as martyrs for Christianity as so much lives wasted meaninglessly, stupidly. I don't think anybody today accepts either the protagonists or champions of the crusades or the many martyrs of crusades as a role model. The Pope who instigated the crusades, Pope Urban II, is completely forgotten. I think I remember Pope Urban II, though not a Catholic, much more than any Catholic would. To Catholics, Pope Urban II is an embarrassment. But at that time, he was the ultimate fountainhead of spiritual wisdom, and whatever he said was the last word about Christianity. He said, let's march to the Holy Land, liberated from the control of the heathens, the Muslims. And how many lives, how many lives. This is the power of indoctrination. Please understand. Think of a communal riot. A group of people are persuaded through indoctrination, that perpetrating atrocities, doing the unnameable, unthinkable on somebody else who happens to be perceived as a hindrance to a particular religion, rather the elite in the religion, their interest, is to be eliminated. Think of the Rwandan genocide. One tribe is persuaded to believe that eradicating the other tribe is a great necessity, it's a very virtuous deed. Think of Manipur, the Kukis and the Meiteis. Why can't peace be restored? Because both communities are now completely brainwashed that eliminating the other is a very righteous thing to do. This is the power of brainwashing. Now, the process corresponding to brainwashing in religion, which is also sometimes called religious nurture, the process corresponding to this in the secular world, in the political realm, is propaganda. Propaganda. What is the function of propaganda? The same thing. Individual conscience must be overpowered with the advocacies and the agenda, the goals espoused by a particular center of power, in order to make the common man a foot soldier of their agenda, political agenda. Religious conscience is overpowered to buttress and promote a political agenda, and in the meanwhile, the conscience of the individuals goes to sleep. They don't perceive any contradiction, dissonance, discordance between their religious insights, their religious beliefs, the purity of it, the nobility of it, the godliness of it, and this agenda of aggression, of destruction, of bloodshed, of hate, of malice? How come that nobody's conscience woke up and protested against it? Today, of course, the situation is changing. As I have said in one of my earliest videos, the very fact that the BJP candidate was defeated by a fairly obscure SP candidate called Avadeshwar in Faizabad constituency clearly shows that the great hype about the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, as though that is the greatest expression of religious fervor, the highest honor that can be accorded to Lord Ram, the embodiment of righteousness, unrighteousness being the garland on Lord Ram, the embodiment of righteousness. Now, when this was going on, when people were actually indoctrinated, and that is to say, completely overpowered with propaganda, and at this point, in this particular instance, indoctrination and propaganda become one. And there's always the likelihood that it happens. It's not very difficult to bring about that merger. They sincerely believed that they should undertake, they should accept, they would undergo any difficulty, incur any risk, including threat to their life, in order to discharge their sacred duties by God. This is the power of public opinion, this is the power of propaganda, this is the power of religious indoctrination. Why I bring this to your notice is to make an appeal. The appeal is, for God's sake, do not violate your conscience. Your conscience tells you what is right and wrong. And that the voice of conscience can be interpreted, has been interpreted but in two different ways. These are not my interpretations, these are the interpretations that have happened a long time before me. The religious interpretation of conscience is that conscience is a voice of God speaking within you. That's a religious interpretation. The secular interpretation of conscience is that substance, so to speak, within you, which is the a result of humanity's long journey, social, religious, etc., within which certain idea or ideas about right and wrong have been formulated. And by virtue of being nurtured and made to grow up in a society, that social more is automatically imbibed by every individual. It gets deeply deposited in the subconscious mind of the individual concerned, and therefore members of the given society, irrespective of the religions they practice or do not practice, they have more or less the same conscience. You will not come across Hindus with a different conscience than Christians with their conscience, or Christians different to Muslims as far as conscience is concerned. Conscience is the common denominator. And this, more than anything else, is a safer guide to human conduct. The voice of your conscience is more apt to lead you in the direction of justice and truth, compassion and righteousness than the voice of your religious leaders, the voice of your political leaders, who had to first kill their conscience to be able to advocate what they do. And this is a very clear thing. My job here is only to make you a little more aware of it. Please be vigilant. Whatever is advocated in the name of religion, whatever is advocated in the name of God, whatever is advocated in the name of patriotism, whatever is advocated in the name of national pride, even whatever is advocated in the name of development, everything has to be taken with a pinch of salt. And your guiding light in the process is your own conscience. No matter how insignificant you are, believe you me, your conscience is a good enough guide. But try not to blind your conscience by wrongdoing. If you persist in wrongdoing, then your conscience gets bedimmed, weakened. If you deny the truth that you know, if you practice cruelty, if you refuse to stand up for justice, if you harden your hearts and do not practice compassion, if you side with those who are cruel, callous, aggressive, those who believe in violence, your conscience will slowly become weaker and weaker, more and more blind. Ultimately, it will become paralyzed, ineffective. Then you are an easy prey, sitting duck for these predators who come in the name of God and nation, politics and religion, to take you, drag you by your neck, take you wherever they want and make you do the most abominable thing. And you will be left to pay the price for it, face the consequence of it. No advocacy or no champions of any advocacy who try to influence you in this kind of infernal fashion, diabolic fashion, and make you do things that you otherwise would not have even thought of, would ever stand with you thereafter after the dreadful thing is done. They will go, they will leave you in the lurch. You will be left deep in the doldrums. You will be left at the bottom of the abyss to fend for yourself. And that is a terrible state, and I wish it does not happen to any one of you. I wish it does not happen to any human being. I wish it does not happen even to an animal. That's a concern that makes me share these thoughts with you, and I want to thank you most sincerely for your patient attention. Thank you, and have a blessed day.